I've been using the new iPad Pro 12.9 inch for the last couple weeks, and I've got a lot of thoughts about it. But most of those thoughts have already been taken by other YouTubers, so I'm going to flip the script a bit. You see, I've got a secret. Beneath this cool, suave YouTuber exterior, I'm secretly a pencil pusher. I know, you guys are probably so disappointed in me because, like many of you, I spend a lot of my days just typing away at a keyboard at a desk in a traditional office job. But this might actually be good because this will allow me to frame this review in a different manner. Not as a creator, but instead as kind of an average Joe office worker. Managing a small electronics store means that I spend a lot of my time in spreadsheets, and doing some development work on the side means that I spend a lot of time in Stack Overflow. I mean Visual Studio. But for that reason, I'm going to frame this review a little bit differently. This is NOISO, and this is my iPad Pro 2021 review. Let's start with the display. Blah, 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 incredible technology, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure that mini or macro or micro or macaroni LEDs are sometime going to be the future, and I'm fully ready for that. And this display is absolutely incredible, but it really doesn't look too different from the last iPad Pro display, and if I'm not just watching movies in the dark, I really struggle to see the immediate difference. See, what really makes this display awesome is the 120Hz refresh rate when I'm just sitting there and browsing, but first of all, that was on the last model, and second of all, it really doesn't make a difference when I've got it set up and working with a keyboard and mouse. So it's great, then this display is awesome, but at some point in time you get to a point where if you're in working mode, you stop to think about the display you're looking at and just the content that you're looking at. At some point in time, I'd love for the 120Hz refresh rate to be utilized towards gaming, because that seems like the next logical step. But unfortunately, it still seems like despite years and years of having incredible performance, Apple still hasn't gained a massive amount of AAA games from the kind of entrenched gaming industry. And so maybe someday we'll get there, but unfortunately it feels like a waste of power for the performance and screen of this product. The mini LED of it all, this massive improvement in technology, really feels like a small jump from the last model. And specifically, the difference I see is when watching videos in the dark. Where previously I had gray bars on the top and bottom, now I have black bars on the top and bottom of my Parks and Rec, which is great, I guess. Sure, it means that it's less distracting, but I'm no video snob, and what matters more to me is the fact that I have to still hold this massive platter in order to watch 16:9 content, which is likely only showing up in 10 inches worth of screen. And so, frankly, the bigger solution is not necessarily to have big black bars, but not to have anything at all. But I don't think I'm going to convince anyone for Apple to switch back to a 16:9 screen on their tablets. But you know what would help all that massive trapezius pain? A simple invention called, wait for it, yes, the Kickstand. This ancient technology was created by the Redmonians back in the Balmerian era of 2011. And while it seems like a very primal sort of technology, it really innovated and brought the whole market forward, only for it to kind of never show up on iPads. And while I completely understand that Apple on their earlier curvy iPads didn't want a kickstand to mar the design, I hope at some point in time Apple stops to think, maybe we should look at function over form for once and design a kickstand so people don't have to hold these massive 12.9-inch tablets. I don't know if it'll ever happen, and maybe third parties are going to fill the gap. But for me, a $350 Magic Keyboard case is not the solution, and a $150 floppy keyboard folio doesn't seem like the right solution. So maybe it's just my frustration, but I wish that Apple made a true kickstand for these devices. The rest of the design is great. It's not anything new from the last generation, but that's not a bad thing. I love it and I appreciate it. I just wish sometime that if they really truly want to switch over to a computer-focused sort of tablet, like a computer-first tablet, that they started prioritizing trying to let it sit on a surface comfortably. We'll get past it. Now, speaking of computers, I've tried several times to make my iPad Pro my primary one, and generally it's not gone well. it might be significantly tougher for me considering I'm coming from Windows and premium Windows laptops, which might be an easier switch if you've either come from cheap Windows laptops that are crappy or come from Mac OS where you might be a little bit more familiar with interacting with it. But even so, my MacBook Air still feels like a much more natural way to interact with the computer than this has been. But I've been using it for several different things. First of all, I've been using it for video editing using LumaFusion, but again, this is not the focus here. The next thing I've been using on is, like I said before, for spreadsheets. I've been trying to basically do most of my spreadsheet work on my iPad, which is frustrating to say the least. Now, obviously, Microsoft hasn't brought over a full fat Office over to the iPad, and the Microsoft Office for iPad is pretty feature poor comparatively, and those sort of pro features is exactly what I need out of a premium spreadsheet application. Now, I've slightly covered the gap in terms of using Office Online, Excel, and using Google Sheets. I can still build financial models with income statements and balance sheets to my heart's content as long as I have a full-featured keyboard. But you know what doesn't have a full-featured keyboard? The iPad Pro. I actually have to have a full separate keyboard with all the function keys in order to be anywhere near the speed that I could be on a traditional laptop. And unfortunately, not only does the Magic keyboard not have a full function row, but the Logitech keyboard and the Bridge keyboard don't have traditional function rows, instead using their top row for purely controlling your brightness and volume and stuff like that. So as a result, I unfortunately have to use a separate keyboard in order to do that sort of spreadsheet work, which kind of rules out being able to keep it on my lap, like a laptop. And then there's the little bit of web development that I've been learning. Now, I'm not a coder, so keep that in mind, but my use, along with a lot of the sentiment that I've seen online, comes to the conclusion that the iPad Pro isn't the best device for coding. Now, I've been using the Coder app along with some other applications with my program running on its server in order to try and work on it. And generally it works. Like anytime I update any of the HTML or JavaScript, my program is updated, which is nice to see. But none of the logging comes through properly, and there's a lot more effort that I have to put in order to get it to be anywhere near as capable, as functional as I need it to be, or as I have it on my MacBook Air or any other laptop that I use. And so for that reason, it is more of a frustration, and forcing myself to use it as a coding device has been more of a frustration. Of course, the obvious lack here is applications like Xcode, which we were hoping for at WWDC and didn't get. Instead, we got Swift Playgrounds, which I don't code in Swift, so I can't tell you whether it's good or bad, but I'd venture to guess it's not great. So then for a general use case of using it for editing documents and writing scripts and writing articles and stuff like that, sure, the iPad Pro works absolutely excellently. At some point in time, you get to a point where you're, really focusing on the work that you're doing and switching between applications, and you forget maybe what operating system you're even running on. And so the iPad Pro definitely gets you there. But there are still several times where I have context switching, where I need to open up a new program, and I start to remember how difficult it actually is for me to work on the iPad the same way I would on a MacBook or a Windows machine. Look, many of the updates announced at WWDC were really good quality of life updates. For me, I felt like they were talking directly to me as they described moving a mouse across every device. I had an iMac, MacBook Air, and this iPad Pro sitting in front of me. And I would love to be able to do that. But despite the fact that Apple has spent the last few years on iPad updates focusing around productivity, I still don't feel like it's solving any of the inherent problems that I have with the operating system in being more productive. Like, Apple, why don't you just give us a normal mouse cursor? I can see the mouse cursor moving from here to there. This doesn't seem like continuity at all. Now I'll address a few more things before finishing up. First of all, I'm still amazed at how well the battery life holds up on this device. Specifically the fact that I can go a couple days without even touching it and then pick it up and all of a sudden it is still 80% or 90%, which is incredibly impressive, and I wish that every single laptop had that sort of functionality. I've been waiting for way too many years with Intel and Microsoft claiming that this update is going to have the best battery life, and picking up my laptop after a few days, I'm still going to have full battery. It's never been the case. And the fact that this boots instantly, unlike most Windows laptops, is absolutely insane. I was a little bit late to the party for the Apple Pencil 2, but I am really glad that I got it because I've started to use it more and more for apps like Photoshop and LumaFusion and just note-taking apps, or practicing my Chinese. It has been very, very convenient, but not something that I necessarily would consistently pay $150 or $130 for. I'm really impressed with the Apple Pencil 2, and it is a great product, and I appreciate the fact that Apple didn't iterate to the Apple Pencil 3, which would have eliminated compatibility with previous devices, like they did between the Apple Pencil 1 and Apple Pencil 2. This is a great device. I just wish it was a little bit cheaper for people. And then there's the new feature, which is the camera. So this camera is supposed to be a massive improvement over previous FaceTime cameras, which I was really hoping to see. See, instead of just the normal camera that we'd expect, this instead is a completely wide-angle sensor that instead focuses in on you through a technology called center stage. This is similar to what we've seen on some other devices like the Portal, and I talked about it a lot in my first look, so check that video out if you haven't already. But after a couple of weeks of using it, I can tell you that yes, it's really cool, but unfortunately we have to wait for support from all of the video chat applications like Zoom. And frankly, for most use, I don't think it really is going to make a significant difference. You see, most of the time I spend in front of my iPad working on it or making video chats, I'm sitting right in front of the iPad and I don't need it to pan around and follow me around a room. That's an excellent feature for maybe an iPhone that you want to set up somewhere, or maybe a camera that you hook up to your TV like the Portal. But when it comes to the iPad, it's not too often that I set it up and then make video calls by walking around the room. It's a great feature for those who need it, but in reality, the actual camera quality becomes worse because the resolution gets distributed over a wider view. And so I would greatly have preferred just a high quality camera to start with a standard view angle. Okay, here's the bottom line. If you're the type of person who has not tried replacing your laptop with an iPad and you want to try something out, go get the 2018 model of this device, because frankly, the additional cost, which in some cases is twice the price of the 2018 model, is not worth it. And sure, you're getting some extra features added on, but I wouldn't pay for them. If by some stroke of dumb luck you happen to love your iPad Pro first or second generation and you're looking to upgrade, then first of all, welcome to a channel that is made by a Windows lover. And second of all, you really should consider the iPad Pro 2021 because this might be the perfect device for you. But for the average Joe, I don't think this is quite the right solution. Hopefully Apple will realize the fact that we are all looking for pro support, or we're looking for something to truly replace a laptop, and they will continue to develop towards it. But it might take a while for that to actually happen. A lot of real change has to come from the developers, because despite a lot of them actually committing to this idea of the iPad as a computer now, a lot of them really haven't, and still have significantly hamstrung apps on their iPad apps relative to the desktop equivalent. And I'm not sure whether to blame Apple or the developers for this, but it really feels like they're lacking there. The only other question I have is why now? Why did Apple decide to release the iPad Pro 2021 when they have a perfectly great iPad Pro 2020 and they haven't updated every year in the past? Maybe there's a reason for them wanting to have the M1 chip across their desktop, laptop, and tablet products, but I'm not sure why, considering they're not building the same software across the three. Maybe I'm missing something. Let's talk about it down in the comments. If you haven't already, be sure to get subscribed and like this video. If you like this video, be sure to check out some of my other videos on the iPad, my MacBook, iMac, whatever you like. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.